All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about knife fighting. Okay, so here's the thing when it comes to knife fighting. There's different types of knives. They do different things. Okay, so if you got a knife like this, you can see how this is really pointy and thin. So this is really good at stabbing. All right. The fact that it's thin, right, means that when you stab with this, this pushes aside a lot less material. Okay. Whereas a knife like this, right, this is really good at cutting. Right. The reason why this is really good at cutting is because the blade is thin. Okay. The problem with this knife is this knife sucks at stabbing. Right. You can obviously see that this isn't going to stab very well. The blade is going to probably break. The reason why this cuts really well is because the blade is thin. Right. So because the blade is thin, when it goes in, it pushes aside less material. Whereas, this knife over here, well, take a look at this knife over here, right? This is a K-bar, right? So this knife is kind of like in the middle. It's got a point here. It's good for stabbing, right? But because this is a little bit wider, right? Yeah, I mean, fine. If you're trying to stab into something that's pure flesh, sure, it'll go in. But what if you've got like layers of clothing, a jacket, Now it'll go in through the first layer, then it'll kind of get stuck in the material as it continues to push forward. Whereas something like this, because it's a little bit thinner, it's going to push through multiple layers of material. So the thing with knives is, when you're thinking about knife fighting, you gotta kind of figure out what type of weapon you're using and what's it going to be better at. Is it going to be better at cutting, or is it going to be better at stabbing? Yeah. So that's the first thing you got to know about your knife. Okay. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to knife fighting, the cool thing about knife fighting is that we use blades like these, right? Like, this is an example now, where we actually get to fence each other. We actually get to, because I can stab you with this safely, right? That's not something that we can do with gunfighting, right? When we're doing our gun training here, we're either using real guns and we're shooting at fake targets, right? Or if we're using real people, right, we're using fake guns. We're using an airsoft, a paintball, something like that. So you can't have real guns and real people, right? So that's one of the shortcomings of gun training. And it doesn't matter if you're doing military training, right? Same thing in the military. They're either shooting with real guns at fake targets, or they're doing laser tag, right, with fake guns on real people. So you can never have real guns with real people. The nice thing about knives is that this is made out of steel, right? You can have real knives or very realistic knives, right? And use it against real people. So for that reason, the techniques of knife fighting, right, are very developed, right? People have been doing it for centuries, right? And it's very developed because we continue to do it. We continue to practice it, and we get really good at it. Okay, so if you compare guns to knives on a skill level, we can actually go a little bit further with the training. Okay. Now here's a very interesting knife. If you look at this knife over here, it's got an edge on it, right? Yeah. Right. It's got an edge on it, but it's a very thick blade. Okay. Yes. So but it's kind of like a roundish blade over here. Okay. So even though this has an edge on it, it's not gonna this is basically this is a medieval knife. Okay. The part of the reason why this blade is so thick is because it was meant to stop a blade like this. Okay. Now obviously it's not ideal to fight a sword with a knife, but this has enough mass on the blade that you can actually block this, hook it, pull it down, so you have a chance with it. So I can actually fight a technique, right, where I've got the sword in one hand, knife in the other hand. I'm using this mostly to block, using this to attack, right? And if I get close enough, I can also use this to stab. Okay. So this kind of goes back to, you gotta know what kind of a blade you're using, and what is it good at. Is it good at slicing? Is it good at cutting? Okay. So that's the thing you gotta consider. Now, today we're gonna be using these things as knives. So again, it comes back to knowing what type of a knife we're using. Are we using a slicing knife, or are we using a cutting knife? Okay. Now, if we look at medieval techniques, a lot of the medieval techniques were overhanded, right? If you look at the old manuals, you did a lot of these overhanded techniques, and part of the reason was because medieval people wore multiple layers of clothing, so you had to actually penetrate like four layers of clothing, and in order to do that, you needed a somewhat pointy knife, right? And you needed to use your large muscles, your lat muscles over here, right? This muscle over here is designed to have you do pull-ups, right? So you can deliver a lot of downward power like this, right? Use your back muscles. Your back muscles are way bigger than your chest muscles. You throw your body into it. So they use these overhanded techniques. today when we teach knife fighting, we usually teach, this type, a blade forward technique like this. The reason is because people don't wear a lot of layers of clothing. So this is normally what we're fighting with. So we're going to simulate this with these wooden dowels. And here's the thing to understand with knife fighting. First of all, your body naturally moves in this motion, right? So if you hold a sword here or the blade here, it's going to cut like this. You can cut back in the opposite direction. You can go diagonally. You can go across. Those are the natural movements that you can just make this X shape. Just hold it out, make an X shape, right? See how it comes up, right? You can go from the opposite direction, right? So your body naturally wants to make that X movement. Okay. Now the thing that you'll notice with that is when you make that X movement, right, from this position here, you're now in a position where you can come up and cut again, or you can also stab. Okay. So at the ending position, I'm in a position where I can cut, or I'm in a position where I can stab, all right? So any cut can turn into a stab, or it can come back as a cut, okay? So that's the technique that, because right now we're talking about modern knife fighting, right? We're not talking about medieval knife fighting. We're talking about a situation where you have fairly thin layers of clothing that you're likely to encounter, and we're most likely, the type of knife that we're probably talking about is not even this, right? Probably not even this. We're probably talking about this, right? When we're talking about modern day knife fighting, we're talking about something like this. Now, so if we look at this knife over here, what's this good at doing, right? I mean, it's got an edge here, right? Yeah, but here's the thing. It's not going to cut through clothes very well, right? Even though it's got here, feel that edge. See, it's got an edge on it. Yeah. I can actually cut paper with this, right? I can take a piece of paper and I can cut it and say, wow, I got a sharp knife over here. But when you're trying to cut through, you're not. So this knife ultimately is going to thrust. Okay, so even though it's got a sharp edge on it, ultimately your final destination with this is to either cut. But there is one place where you can actually cut with this knife and for it to have some effect. Okay, well, it depends. Getting to the throw is kind of hard. Okay, now here's the thing. As we stand here, right, extend out like you're going to fight me, right? Okay, the closest thing to me is your hands. Right. Okay. The hands are very sensitive, okay? If I hit you hard enough there, you're going to want to drop that, right? So I can, even though this thing has very little weight on this, right? If I hit you hard here, that's not going to make, if I hit you hard on here, that's not going to make you drop the knife. But you got your hand out, and I hit you hard enough on the fingers, you're going to get a lot of pain in your hand. There's a good chance that that's going to make you drop the knife or get you to think about pain rather than killing me. Right? So that's a good target area, the fingers, okay? Especially with a typical, is it hurting already?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just looking.
Making sure your fingers are still there?
Yeah.
So this is really good at stabbing, but as far as cutting, right, even though, let me get this box over here, hold on for a second. Right? So this has a blade over here, right? So the way people usually test their knives is they'll cut into a piece of paper like that. Say, oh look, it cuts. It's a sharp knife. Yeah, it's a sharp knife, but it's not going to cut through fabric. Okay, it's just not how it works. So as far as my cutting motions, my target area is your fingers. Right? That's where I'm going to cut at. If I had a really sharp knife like this, now this knife has no chance of thrusting. Okay, so with this knife over here. Now I'm looking to cut your hands, but because this is such a thin blade that cuts, I can also look at cutting tendons. I'm gonna pull the blade back so I can cut you. Right? I can cut tendons here. I can cut into muscle here. This is a good knife where if we get into a situation like that, where instead of just going for the fingers, because the fingers are a smaller area, I can cut at your wrists. Okay, right? And then from here I'm set up. Right? When I cut here. Right, from here I'm set up to now cut here. Right? So I'm constantly making these back and forth motions, working with the natural movements of my body. Okay. Now, what I want to talk to you about now is distance. Okay. With my wood. Oh, I put it over there. So, when it comes to knife fighting or sword fighting, right, one of the most important things to consider is the distance. Because see, in this position here where we're at, right, let's get to a fighting position, right? Right, we know, like, I can't reach your hand, you can't reach me. I know I'm in a safe position here. This is what we call our engagement range. The reason is because, see, at this distance here, back up a little bit so we both get into here. So at this distance here, I have to take more than one step to reach you, right? But in this position here, right, even though I can't reach you, you can't reach me, with one step, I can reach you. So that's why we call that engagement range, okay? So I'm out of range, but I can quickly come into range, right? And then in here is where this is in close range. I don't have to move. I can stab you, you can stab me. This is the most dangerous place to be with a knife, okay? I almost never want to get this close unless I already have control of your knife. So if I'm here, extend out, right? So if I'm here and basically I'm here, I come down like this, this is when I want to enter that range. And now I'm set, I've taken control of your blade, and now I'm set up for the thrust, right? But I'm not going to come in this close until I've already got control of that, right? And there's a couple of ways, you know, one of the ways that we may have to, like, let's say you're attacking me, right? So here, right, I blocked it there. I might take control like this, and now I'm following the same motion. Cut here. Now from here, I'm in a position to decide what kind of a blade. I made my first cut. Okay, I'm going to make a decision. What kind of knife do I have? Is this a stabbing knife or is this a cutting knife? If this is a razor, like this over here, right? I can't stab you, so I'm either going to cut at your throat, or if I don't want to kill you, I can cut at the bicep, right, or the tendon, right? Because if I cut the tendons over here, you can't do anything. As I come up here again, I'm in a position to make another cut. Right, and as every time I make my cut, I'm in a position to decide: do I want to make a cut or do I want to make a stab? And that's going to be determined by what type of blade do I have. Do I have one that's really good at cutting, or do I have one that's good at stabbing? Okay, so that's the thing you want to be always aware of. Now, as I was starting to say, the most important here is this concept of distance, because here we're in a position I can't reach you, you can't reach me. Now, if you come towards me, like let's say come in and attack me, if I stand still. Yeah, okay, I'm trying to block this. Maybe I'll get the block. Let's do it again. Come over here. Like, let's say I don't even use the knife. Let's say, maybe I'll get this block. Maybe I won't get this block. You know, the point is, I'm standing still. You're moving forward towards me, let's say at, I don't know, 15 miles an hour, right? All right. From my perspective, you're moving into me. I have to, like, basically, you know, I have to basically, like I got my two crosshairs here, right? It's like, there's my target, right? So I have to make this calculation as you're moving, get back and move in again. If I stand still, I have to make a calculation at what point you're going to be here and at what point I'm going to block you, all right, or somehow stop that blade. The problem is that if I make a mistake, right, in my calculation of at what point the two of us are going to meet, there's a good chance that I'm dead, okay? So the way that I fight, the way that most fencers fight is, when we come over here, what I want to do is I want to match your speed. So step back a little bit, right? So now as you come in, see what I did? Okay, so what I did is, as you came in, right, I maintained the distance. So stick out your blade for a second, right? All right, so basically, you're going to basically move in. See how I maintain distance? Move back, 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 back. Okay, go that way. See how? Come in, right? Okay. So by me matching your distance, whatever speed you're going in, if you're moving forward 15 miles an hour, I want to be moving backwards 15 miles per hour, because I want to be able to match your speed so I can see what are you doing with your hands, what are you doing? And the perfect example of this is when you're driving down the road, right? Or actually, let's say you're standing still right here, right? And you got a car going by at 60 miles an hour. It's moving a little bit more this way. You're standing here, you got a car coming in at 60 miles an hour past you, right? You can't see what the guy inside the car is doing because you're standing still. That car's going right past you at 60 miles an hour. But if you're on the highway, right, and you've got one car going 60 miles an hour, and you're right next to that car also going 60 miles an hour in that same direction, because the both of you are now going at the same speed, you're in a position to look over, and you can see the guy next to you that he's, you know, drinking his coffee or looking at his cell phone while he's driving or picking his nose or whatever he's doing, right? Yeah. Because you have matched his speed, right? Now, even if your speeds aren't identical, right? If he's doing 60 miles an hour, right, and you're doing maybe 65 miles an hour or 55, as the two cars go past each other, the relative speed between the two cars is still the same or close to it. So you can still look over and see what's happening, okay? So that's one of the important concerns that I have with fighting, right? I want to match your speed so I can see what you're doing with it, right? So if you're coming forward, come forward, okay, I can see it. Well, what if you do something? Now, I want you to come forward, right, and you can stab me, you can cut me, you can do whatever you want, okay? Come in. All right, see how I matched you there? The reason why I was able, because I didn't know you were going to come from that angle. The reason why I was able to see that is because I matched your speed. So as you came in, I now have extra time. I have slowed everything down, right? If I stand here and you're coming in like this, like strike me somewhere else. Okay, I have. If you go faster somewhere else. Okay, now here's the thing: you still got to me, right? You still managed to make contact. Do it again. Attack somewhere else. No, fast. Do it fast. Okay, you're getting pretty close to my body. The reason why you're getting closer to my body now with your attack is because I don't have time to figure out what you're doing and to react to it. Now do the same thing. Attack me some random area. Go ahead. Okay. See, that time, because I moved back, I can see what you're doing. Right. Go somewhere else now. So matching your speed is a key characteristic. And the same thing goes for you. If I'm attacking you, right? If you stand, there you go. See, just by moving back, all of a sudden you were able to see. Anytime you weren't ready, right? You were able to see where I'm going. So that's important. Now, as far as knife fighting, right? Now that you've understood this concept of matching your speed, you want to disarm, right? You don't want to go straight to the body because I can attack you here, you can attack me here, we're both dead. Okay? So when it comes to knife fighting, I'm not trying to kill you immediately. I'm trying to get you so that you can't kill me, right? So attack me. So here, if I hit you hard enough, you're probably going to drop that, okay? So once you drop that or weaken your hand, now I'm in a position to come in, right? And then from this position here, I'm in a position to decide if I need to cut, or I can either turn my hand like this and go straight into a cut, right? Because I can turn my hand, go into a cut, or come up and make a cut, you know, and that's here. I'm in a position to make a thrust. But the point is I've got control of your blade. Right. I've got to take control of that blade before I get any closer, right? So let's try again. Do a random attack somewhere. Okay, so you're there, right? I made my cut. Now, I didn't catch you on the wrist, on the fingers. Now, if this is a razor, yeah, maybe that'll make you cut it. If it's one of those other knives, we're still going to continue. So come in. So you're not out of the fight yet. So continue your attack. Okay? See, the reason why I was able to do that is because I stepped back. Right. I created a distance, but now I got control of your hand. Mm-hmm. So now from here, there you go, because you moved back, right? If you didn't move back, you wouldn't be able to do that. So those are the key considerations with knife fighting. Maintaining that distance so that you can see what the other person's doing and then figure out what type of how you're going to counter it. And your basic attacks it's going to be a cut or it's going to be a stab. Okay, so I'll do it for the camera. So you're either cutting like this. So from this position here, I'm now in a position where I can cut back or I can turn the knife over and make a stab, right? And then from here, I can, basically I can continue back. Again, I'm in a position to decide if I'm going to make a stab or if I'm making a cut. So wherever you end up, you're in a position to make a cut or a stab. And depending on the type of blade that you have, again, this is a K-bar, very sharp knife, right? But it's not, if you got layers of material, this is not going to cut through that material. At least it might cut the skin, but it's not going to cut all the way through into the muscle, into the tendon. Okay, so in this type of a fight, my target area would be the hands, right? It would ultimately using the point to get into the body. Okay, so that's how we use something like this. So, any questions on any of that?
No, good.
You like that? Interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Cool. All right, let me turn off the camera and we'll get to gunfighting now. As I was reviewing the video, I realized that you guys really can't see the knives as so clearly because I had to push the camera back a little bit. So I thought I'd kind of do a prequel to the video and give you guys a close-up to the knives so that you guys can know in advance what we're talking about. Here's an example of two different types of knives. This one being a razor, this one being a really pointy knife over here. This one's really good at cutting, okay? Now, obviously, that's not really good at stabbing. The reason why that's good at cutting is because the blade is thin, okay? That thinness is necessary for a knife to give a good cut because what happens is as it cuts through the material, it has to push aside less material to get deeper, right? So this way you can make a quick cut over here and you can actually get past the skin and dig into muscles and tendons. You can go through the cloth, right? Go through the skin and get into the muscles and tendon. I don't think I need to demonstrate that. I'm pretty sure you guys believe that a razor will do that. On the other hand, here I have a knife that has a nice point to it, right? Even though this has a sharp blade on it, right? It's got a sharp blade on it. You know, a lot of people will test the sharpness of their knife by, you know, doing the classical let's cut the paper type of thing, right? So even though this has a sharp blade on it, that's not going to cut through fabric. Now, I wouldn't do that with the razor, right? Because I know that the razor will go through it, okay? So this knife, and the reason why it's not cutting into the material is because the blade is a little bit thicker, and it needs to be thicker in order for this to be a good stabbing knife. Because what happens is, if you know, I need to be able to push down on something, okay, and for that blade not to bend or break. If I did the same thing with this razor, you know, basically you can see how that blade is already bending, okay? So a thin knife that is good for cutting, you know, is not gonna be good for stabbing because it's gonna break, okay? So those are your two extremes, you know, and then you've got kind of knives that are sort of like in the middle, like this K-bar over here, which you know, you could put a nice edge on this. Still, even though this has a nice edge on it, you know, you can't. This is really a stabbing knife. I mean, realistically, this is a utility knife. If you talk to most soldiers that have used knives like this K-bar, you know, to them this is a utility knife. They use this to, you know, dig into dirt and break dirt loose, or to pop tires on, you know, they consider this more of a utility knife. But because it has a good point on it, you know, against a person that doesn't have too many layers of clothing, it's a good stabbing knife. However, this stabbing knife is not going to be as good as this stabbing knife, and the reason is because, you know, it's just a little bit wider over here. So again, as this point goes through, it needs to push aside more material, and that's kind of the reason why they gave it this little thing here to try to make this point a little bit thinner, versus, let's say, a knife like this, right, which is a little bit wider over here. You know, as you try to push into something, again, it's got to push more material aside in order for this point to get through. This knife over here, you know, I mean, it's got an edge on it, but this is a very thick blade, okay? So this is definitely not going to cut through any material. This is a medieval fighting knife, okay? The purpose of this knife, all right, is to be paired up with a sword like this. So if your shield breaks, okay, basically you can pull this knife out, because this knife has enough mass on it, okay, that it you know, it has a chance. It's not the best tool for stopping a sword, but it has a chance of blocking the sword. And, you know, one way that you can fight this knife is kind of like this. So basically, this is your primary weapon, but then you can kind of use this. You can transfer the weapon to this. You know, so this is, you know, so you can use these two weapons together. So this is a battlefield weapon, not really meant to cut, okay, more meant to stab, you know, do some blocking, move things to the side. We're going to talk a little bit more in the video about how this was used. Now over here I've got two different types of swords, right? So same thing, same deal. This sword is really good at cutting. All right, because, you know, you can see the blade is a little bit round over here. It's got more mass on the blade, so this will cut better. And this doesn't, the funny thing is, this doesn't need a razor sharp edge in order for this to cut good, because this has enough mass behind it that even with a relatively dull blade, you can still make good cuts with this. Now this type of sword here really, you know, typically had a thinner blade. Even though if you put an edge on this, yeah, it can cut. This is really not good at cutting. This is really good at stabbing. This is a stabbing tool, right? This is how this is primarily used with. And if you were going to pair up a knife to this, you would use something like this, right? So a thinner, longer knife. The way I would fight this is something like this. And the purpose of this, it's long, is to try and catch the other person's blade at distance and kind of basically deflect it out of the way. Okay, so that's how these type of knives were used. So the important point I'm bringing out here is, when you look at a knife, right, you gotta decide what kind of a knife do you have. Do you have one that's good at cutting, or do you have one that's good at stabbing? All right, and based on that, you're gonna you're gonna be able to figure out what you gotta do with it. In the video, one of the knives that I use, is this knife over here for the demonstration. Typical pocket knife. If we're talking about using a knife for self-defense, realistically, you're not gonna. It's not likely you're gonna be carrying a K-bar like this, right? Realistically, you're either gonna have a box cutter or you're gonna have a pocket knife like this. So if you have a box cutter, that's a cutting knife. If you have a knife like this, again, the blade up here being a little bit thicker, and yeah, it's got a sharp edge on it, so that it will cut paper. If I can get into the right position, see how it can cut paper, right? All right, but here's the thing: it's still not gonna go through fabric. Okay, I mean, if I do this on my skin, yeah, it'll cut the skin because the skin. But here's the thing: you can cut through the skin, but you're not gonna get through the muscle all the way to the tendon. Okay, so with a knife like this, if you were to use this in self-defense, this is basically ultimately a stabbing tool. You know, now in the video I talk about, you know, you can use this to kind of cut at the fingers, right, of the other person holding the blade. Not necessarily because you're going to cut the fingers off, but because the fingers are very sensitive, and you hit the fingers hard enough with this over here, it's going to hurt them. It might get them to, you know, drop their blade or think about doing something else other than killing you. Okay,